Just to answer a couple of questions from before, the obligation to reporting is domain 2, paragraph 23, subsection C, about obligation to report. I know that for reasons that are not entirely clear, and I probably do need to get out more. Right, so reporting and learning. For the purpose of this talk, learning is an automatic thing that comes out of reporting. So I'm not going to specifically target that. So what were our key findings in this the study of NAP6? So reporting of life-threatening perioperative anaphylaxis to local reporting systems was very good, 70% of cases. MHRA, not so good, less than a quarter of cases. General health perspective, potential reporting to MHRA should have a greater impact because we cover the whole of UK and we're not confined to individual institutions. There's current reporting levels and processes mean that data actually held by MHRA, particularly on the medicine side, is unlikely to be completely representative of perioperative anaphylaxis in the real world. But it's an important resource and it needs to be bolstered further. We need to increase our steps to ease reporting and remove barriers to it. We'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. Lack of feedback to both from NRLS and MHRA might impact on the reporting rates, and we certainly need to do better. And if you actually combine both of those rates, if there wasn't any overlap, then we'd have 100% coverage, which we clearly don't. So what is it about reporting systems? Why are they so useful? Normally we operate in our own little sphere and we reinforce our good behaviours by suggesting that everything we do is right, good, proper and above reproach, and anything other people do is probably not of quite the same quality. But of course we're just looking at the data that we are seeing in front of us on a daily basis. And as Benjamin Travers said, well, he quoted actually in his book about injuries to the intestines, treatment of penetrating wounds, strangulated hernia, that if we just press on doing that, we'll never move forward. We'll never know what we're not doing quite right because we're not letting the whole system know about what we do. It's an interesting read if you can get a hold of it. I have a copy. So what are the actual numbers? MHRA reporting in the first instance of cases were 15.8%. That's pretty poor. And after the allergy clinic, 23.7%, also not magical. And it was even worse in children, 9.1% and 18.2%. And as I said before, 70% of cases were reported through the trust reporting systems. And just to pat ourselves on the back, majority of cases reported was by the index anaesthetist. So 44% of them before the allergy clinic assessment by the anaesthetist. Local coordinators, fantastic job done, added another 14%. And there were some other people who also chose to report as well, which is equally good. Of the 10 deaths, only 3 were reported to MHRA. Not a very strong learning potential out of that. What's happening at MHRA? Well, we won't go into that in detail, but we are moving to a new premises soon, just because people have found out where we live. Canary Wharf, it's one of the buildings, it'll be fine. We had 901 reports of suspected anaphylactic or anaphylactoid reactions via the yellow card system. That was in the year January to December 2016. We got up-to-date figures, but we didn't actually have those at the time. 464, which is about 51%, could potentially have occurred in the perioperative period, but actually many of the reports were not about drugs that would necessarily just be used in that setting. So antibiotics could be administered at any time. Many of the other drugs included in this miscellany of reports were also used in non-perioperative settings. And there were some weird ones in there as well. Sevoflurane, sodium chloride, water, steroids, and adrenaline, all culprits potentially for anaphylaxis. You want to be careful out there. It's getting very dangerous. We're also not completely aware of the grades of reaction. So comparison with NAP6 data, there were some significant numbers of reactions to coamoxiclav, ticaplanin, amoxicillin, muscle relaxants are in there as well, and chlorhexidine and patent blue were also in there too. So they all ranked in about the top 11 most frequently reported drugs, and between them accounted for about 27% of all reports. So what's the reality and the utopia thing about reporting? Well, it's because all cases are straightforward. They don't require training, skill or knowledge to undertake. They're undertaken exactly the right time, always in ideal circumstances in patients free from comorbidities. Everything we do is successful. There's no hazards in the short term, intermediate or long term, and there's never any progression of disease at all in any of these patients. Or have I got that all slightly wrong? I think this is why we need to be better at what we're doing here. So what are the elements of good reporting? Well, we need to know what could have gone wrong if the thing had been left to run its course, and if we hadn't all been on the ball and pulled all of those people back from the brink. Because actually, today's near miss could be tomorrow's absolute disaster, and that's a disaster for the patient, the clinician, the institution, the whole system in which we function. And for this stuff to be any good, it's got to be accurate information, it's got to be timely, it's got to be collected in a succinct and manageable way. And we need to include everything being requested by the reporting system, so it's consistent, but there's no obligation on the reporting system. Data should be looked at by the reporting system promptly, and it should only be what's required to answer the question. And the data needs to be looked at regularly. We get data dumps from the NHS once a month. That really isn't an agile way of doing business. So there are things that can be done in there as well. So what can we learn? I said we weren't going to talk specifically about learning, but we can identify critical incidents, trends, and emerging issues. We can use the information for audit, and we can monitor the performance of individuals, the team, the institution. And when we're introducing new processes or procedures, we also can monitor what's going on, because we might be making the ticaplanin mistake, as we have inadvertently for a long time, apparently. And when we're learning, it's going to reduce the pressure on the whole system. Litigation to individuals. We'll be able to fulfill our obligations to the GMC, which we have discussed, and enable healthcare institutions to fulfill their obligations to CQC. And they've got their very long pointy screwdriver thing, which they're getting into lots more things than they used to. So quite useful for keeping all sorts of people happy. So why aren't people reporting? Well, there's a lack of value in the eyes of the people who are doing the reporting. We don't have a lot of education in our training systems why this behaviour is of value and how can we report things. I've actually done the yellow card for a device for myself, and it was an extremely slick thing, not only because my signature block said Clinical Director of Devices, MHRA, on the bottom, but that was a minor part of it. But it wasn't difficult. It was straightforward. The thing I found most difficult was identifying what the device was flipping called, because it wasn't on the packet. But that aside, do we want too much from people? Well, I think maybe if we have conversations with the clinicians and the institutions about how we best collect this data, we will be in a better place. And we also need to allocate proper resources for reporting. We're out of resources in so many different places, but if we're all going to learn and save money and time in the longer term, in the bigger picture, then we've got to make some resources for this behaviour to be encouraged. The one message out of this is we know that reporting improves in a no-blame culture. We're very good at pointing fingers at things, and that's not a good way to get people to join in this behaviour. The rest you can read again, because I'm sure I'm going to be running out of time in a minute. Because no matter how fast I talk, I don't seem to be getting anywhere near the end of my talk. So what are the NAP6 recommendations? I can go a bit more slowly now. I've just realised I had my watch slightly squinted. It's got no numbers on it, so I thought I had 5 minutes less. MHRA could improve communication with clinicians. For example, providing an annual report which includes perioperative anaphylaxis. I will say right now, that wasn't my idea, so my colleagues won't be lynching me for that. That was the other 2 authors on that chapter. The departmental lead should ensure all cases have been reported to the Trust Incident Reporting System. The departmental lead's doing really well here for a new job. should ensure all cases are reported by the anaesthetists, etc., 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 and to MHRA as soon as possible after the event, and record the MHRA case identifier for future reference. Now, this is the bit about stopping double reporting, but also if the allergy clinic reports as well, we've got the same number. So when you write a yellow card report to us, you will get a reply and it will have that number on it. And that number identifies that case. So it is possible with the existing system to have that continuity. So as long as that number's there, it's a really useful thing. On the individuals, departmental lead should be informed of the case was a problem. The case identifier to be included in the reference allergy clinic, so they've got that number. And in all cases of 3 to 5 perioperative anaphylaxis, they should be presented and discussed at the local morbidity and mortality meeting. And that's where the learning is. It also raises the profile, gets people familiar with the system, and that's where the culture change can start to happen. So what are the messages around reporting? Conversation should start with what's happened in the system facilitating this set of circumstances. It should not be who's to blame and how are we allowed to get away with this. That's not it. We're not going to get there with that. Serious incidents and near misses are essential to understanding the untoward events which happen every day. And we've seen this in this snapshot of activity in anaesthesia. These things are going on every single day. But to us, it's one case in however 250,000 years or something. Sorry, I've probably not quite got that number right. But if you put them all together, as has happened in NAP6, that's when the big information starts coming out. That's when people start to realise these are not isolated in our healthcare system. And if we don't have this data, we're going to miss out opportunities to detect and potentially mitigate issues which could be more common than we perceive. And there could be new things that are happening. We're having new drugs all the time. We're changing our behaviours. We're changing what medical devices are made of. And there are new generations of technologies coming along, which will all have little hidden things that we won't find out unless things are reported, and we all learn from those reports. The other thing to say is reporting is a professional responsibility. We've seen that in GMC, but actually, as professionals, we should be involved in that behaviour anyway, regardless of what the GMC are telling us. And so in effect, everybody involved in healthcare has a part to play in reporting. We need strong leadership by medical professionals. It's absolutely essential. If we're not leading, people will not have anybody to follow. And that's particularly important for anaesthetists because people look to us and to the college for those types of behaviours. We need to have a permissive environment and a culture of reporting, otherwise it'll just get lost in the mist, just like other things have along the way. And we can use this data as a learning opportunity and get away from this idea. It's not a vehicle to blame individuals where an error within the system has occurred. It allows us to say, it wasn't the individual, it was this set of circumstances. And without that data and us all being on the same side, things are not going to change. So, just a quick plug for the firm. You can report. It is for devices as well, and we've noted that the chlorhexidine-coated devices are implicated, albeit what appears to be a small number of cases. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Thank you.